Good day, America. Stand by for news. I'm Jack Rickard. This is Electtric Television, EVTV. This is my co-hostage, Mr. Richard Flinchy of the Church of
Method Mormonism, actually Methodist. I am a
I didn't know that about you.
I was born a Methodist, and I plan to die a Methodist.
Well, my golly, that's one of those things you got to do. How'd you get through the Superstorm?
I prayed a lot and prayed for the safety and of the people that were in the middle of it, and pretty well kept my mouth shut.
They had a pretty tough time up there.
They did.
And a lot of interesting things come out of it. I've been well aware of this for many years. In 1998, I had a house in Colorado that had one aerial power line stuck up on a pole coming across the Dakota hog back at me. Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me I was the only one on that line. And whenever they have a big snow out there, a bunch of people lose electricity because if there's a heavy, wet snow, it brings down a lot of the lines. Mm-hmm. In fact, they bury all the power lines out there now, but the old legacy lines are still up there. So if they did have a big power outage, they would go fix what they could fix that would get the most amount of people up, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. Except I was the only one on this line. So it'd be spring before they got to me. So I put in a 15 kilowatt photovoltaic system, 50 kilowatt Trojan lead acid battery backup system, and a 15 kilowatt generator, but it runs on natural gas. And you see them on TV, hey, we need gasoline in here because their generators only run about 4 or 5 hours, and then they run out of gasoline. Then they try to fuel the generators while they're hot, and that sets off a fire. And so the aftermath of some of these things, the quest for electricity is actually the big deal. Anything you go to do, you think, well, hey, heat's no problem. I use natural gas. Yeah, it won't come on unless the blower runs. Yes. Yeah. If the blower doesn't run, then natural gas burner isn't going to come on at all. And, well, I don't have to watch TV. I'll just read a book in the dark. And so you find that you lost control of your temperature environment, and all the things you do for entertainment and to be constantly overstimulated, which is what you're addicted to, are gone. And the things you think you'll replace them with, they don't work either. And this is interesting for an hour or two, aggravating for a day or two, and when you're talking about a week or two, it's absolutely horrifying. You almost go back to a prehistoric state without electricity. And so it's there were a couple of interesting things came out of this one. One, Fisker Automotive had 16 cars piled up at a port ready to ship to dealers.
Yes, I saw that. That's correct.
They burst into flames and burned to the ground after being submerged in seawater. I had a couple of viewers write and ask if that was a problem for us, and then my immediate reaction was, well, no, we're not like Fisker. We don't have to put up with that kind of Mickey Mouse crap. And then I got thinking about it. The more I thought about it, the more the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah. We're not very close to the ocean, though, so it would be river water.
Even then, dirty water is a conductor. Seawater is actually an excellent conductor. If you short out a battery pack by putting the terminals of it underwater, if it gains a current flow.
Current flow out, yeah.
It will discharge those batteries catastrophically and probably set off a thermal event. And they could well burn to the ground and maybe explode. So the answer to the question is, I don't know, and I suspect it wouldn't be good. Going through the car wash isn't a problem for us, but submerging them underwater, under seawater, I think that might be quite.
Apparently, it is a problem.
It is a problem. I got a email message from Alan Levinson, a viewer that's up there, and he's essentially lost the religion. He no longer wants to have anything to do with electric cars. And it's by being out of electricity for a few days. he's scared to death to do anything with his car for fear of draining the batteries down, other than charge his cell phone, and that's where he gets it charged, is in his car. But he said the guys have to wait for gas for their cars, but at least they can go. But he's just out of it.
Well,
and so it's the grid is a consideration. That part of the world has lots of aerial lines, lots of trees, and when they get hit by an event by this,
well,
the trees come down and so do the lines. And the night of the event, they had transformers blowing up. It looked like the 4th of July.
4th of July.
There were 5 nuclear plants
Shut down.
affected, and 2 of them shut down completely during this event.
Well,
it's non-trivial, and everybody on the television is talking about the flood waters and digging out and so forth. They don't get it yet. The big deal is the electricity. If you go a couple days without electricity, you'll be amazed.
how much you miss it.
Oh yes, it's a horrifying thing. So
Well, we will pray they get right with God.
I'm gonna pray that they get right with Hammer and UE.
Yeah, Hammer and UE too. Okay.
That's where it's at. But it does bring to question that we say the grid can handle the electric cars that we would add, and it can up to a point. But basically, we need some significant leadership on the topic of moving to electric cars, but also on upgrading our national grid. I had proposed at one point in writing to some of our representatives, of course they view me as a crackpot, but that we ought to take the 43,000 miles of interstate highway and build the conduit that basically builds a national and federally funded backbone for electrical distribution to get away with these big, huge high-tension wires going from state to state.
And they sure are, yes, they are.
And build the conduit, and then also take that opportunity to put, essentially wireless charging in the roads, where every 100 feet down the road you cross a loop that gives you a little charge.
That would be interesting.
And as you're going 60 miles an hour, that's fairly continuous. But I think that there should be some serious consideration on upgrading our national grid for a lot of reasons. But that's how we distribute power and energy. And if energy is going to be in the future, however you generate it, you still have to get it out there. So that's Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Sandy. They are talking about it various ways, but that's Katrina was a far more destructive storm.
Higher powered winds.
Higher powered winds, but the amount of population, there's 45 million people in that storm track, and it should cause some thoughts in Washington, because it hit Washington.
I hope they go to church more.
I hope they go to church
if you're in Washington, go to church more often and believe in God, because that's where
pray for leadership, because we need to get something going on
that's
electricity.
Really who's in charge of the planet. So.
Well, but we can be in charge of the electricity.
There you go, if we keep the plugs in.
What else you got?
Well,
what's going on this week? SEMA.
SEMA is this week, and those of you who are a little unfamiliar with SEMA, I can give you some of a primer. It is held in a very large convention hall, hundreds of thousands of square feet. Wheels and tire manufacturers are there, automotive companies show, Ford shows there, hot rods and the Mustangs.
What city is that in?
It's in Las Vegas.
Lost Wages?
Lost Wages, which I did go to 3 or 4 SEMAs out there, and it was a lot of work, actually, to work a trade show. And I did not have much time to gamble. I went home and usually went to bed. So, but anyhow, we had discussed the Fisker Karma and why it was going to be at SEMA, and it showed up this week. It was actually used as a sort of a decorative attraction in a 3M booth for the car wrap. And that is something, if you're really into the custom business and you had just had the paint experience with the thing, this is something that I see coming to the future, which is you don't even take the car anymore. They can cut the exact pattern for your car, for say your door panel, and you basically get a colored skin, and you don't have to buy the paint. And it is not real cheap. I called just in journalistic investigation. A hood is about $200. So a whole car probably would be around $1,000. But
you can do a whole car?
You can do every single piece. Yes, and they do lettering, and right now it is in the commercial application where they do lettering and the phone
I think
numbers.
it's fantastic.
I think it is.
So a car with really bad paint, you could simply do a wrap.
Do a wrap, and they were using the Fisker car actually to attract attention to this new product. So that is the 3M skin. That is,
in the foyer, one of the locations out there is a electric Baja buggy.
which I've heard about.
Well, we have our protege Matt Hauber and his partner Michael Bream have created quite a little thing, and they did sort of a professionally edited video of the Baja buggy. Let's take a look.
This is the car of the future. You could hear little gravel hitting the underbelly of the car. All the things that you don't normally hear. You could hear the valves opening and closing, you could hear the limit straps popping, all the stuff you never hear.
The thing's gorgeous. I mean, it's one of the best looking buggies, and the fact that it's electric has already drawn an insane amount of attention.
It's pretty amazing. Torque is out of this world as far as power and torque. You step on the gas and it's just instant, throws you back in the seat. It's pretty cool.
Just rolling 10 miles an hour and nailing the throttle, and it pulls the front wheels off a 5,000-pound vehicle on the street. That's pretty impressive.
That's just pretty cool.
That's what I want right there.
That's what you want.
Yes, that's on my wish list.
Richard wants to do a rat rail.
That's right.
And he has got him the ugliest frame I've ever seen.
Yes.
Purchased for only $1,000, which would your friend tell you that was $800 too much?
No, he said that was market price. It was not a bargain, but it was. I could sell it if I had to. And I got a actual real KP frame, so it's the real deal, and it will be revealed shortly as soon as we get all the rust off and you can find the parts.
So he's going to do a rat rod out of our spares and broken down
It
pieces
will be,
around
but
here.
it's going to be fun, and that's an upcoming project.
Did you ever find the Speedster seats? They were around here somewhere.
They are here somewhere,
Okay.
and I did move them, so I am going to.
Okay.
They're going to a rat rod. For those of you at home who are not that familiar with car shops, you take when you're working, you take all the leftover parts and you try to put something together without really having to buy many extra parts. So we're going to just throw the kitchen sink, and I think there's lots of parts around here, so see what it shows up on there.
Sounds good. My rat rod is a little different. I always wanted to ride around the Yeller carriage.
Yeah, a Yeller carriage?
Yeah.
You got a yellow carriage, by the way.
Well, I do. As you know, we got the VW thing in yellow. Actually, it was several shades of yellow.
I know.
They had new fiberglass fenders that were one shade of yellow. They had a hood that they had kind of almost got back on the car. It was another shade of yellow. And then they had the original doors that had their own shade of yellow. Inside was another yellow. It was a whole lot of different yellows. We sent it to a friend of mine's son, James O'Kelly, and he took some pains with it. Apparently went through it and evened out all the little dimples and dings, got the hood on back straight, and even replaced a lot of the little leather, the rubber trim between the fenders and the body and so forth.
And you had you picked a high-end, a glow-level auto paint. That's a big dog paint.
You know, I can't tell anything from the.
I can tell
from the chips that they send.
They can when you see it.
And I told him that it won't look anything like this, but I want the brightest yellow they have.
Well, you got it.
And I got a pretty.
You got it bright.
Let's take a look. We have a car, if you can get a close-up of this, so yellow, this honeybee thinks it's a flower. Can you see this, Richard? It's a bee under the antenna. This honeybee is trying to gather pollen off a 1974 VW thing, and there's another one come to join him. We have mentioned this in the past. We got a yellow thing. I went and had it repainted, and guess what color it came back as? Yellow. But I like yellow. And this is now an even brighter yellow, but we replaced all the rubber trims here, taken out all the dings, smoothed it out, got the hood on straight, and kind of have a yellow car all over, except now it's bright yellow. We like to work on nice cars, and so this one was a little old, so we sent it out to get it repainted, and now it looks a lot nicer. He straightened out our hood for us a little bit up front here, and now we have our fenders, which were newer, to match the regular paint, and it looks really good. I think we're going to have a sharp looking little yellow thing, yellow and black, and he repainted our roll bars and our bumpers and so forth in a flat black, which looks very nice, and it almost disappears because it's so black. And so that's what we're going to have, is a black and yellow VW thing. I don't have much progress to report. James O'Kelly's son painted it for us, and we're going to have him do some more painting for us because he does such an excellent job. And so I think I'm going to have him paint my wife's car too. But this has come back. I'm very pleased with the look and the color. I told him I wanted a really bright yellow, and I think he got it. It's got just a touch of green in it where it's almost a neon yellow. And so we should be able to find it and see it coming. And so this we're going to do a conversion on. It'll be a fairly simple conversion. And along the way, a friend of his wanted a VW motor, and I think we sold it to him for $250, but he has to come take it out, which would be a good thing for me. Then I don't have to. So this will be the VW thing in its new yellow trim, which is all different from its previous yellow trim. But we got a lot of little nicks and things straightened out. Richard backed the car into it and put a ding in it. And but he smoothed out most of the dings and little dimples and matched everything on the car to be all one yellow instead of 2 or 3 shades. And along the way replaced some of our rubber goods and trim pieces, and I think it looks fabulous, and I think this is going to make a gorgeous little electric yellow electric thing. Stay with us. Is that yellow, or what shade of blue is that, Richard?
I believe that's
on the yellow side.
That's dandelion. If you hold it under your chin and you see yellow, then you know it means you're in love.
You know what CMYK is, don't you? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
This would be the yellow part.
This would be the yellow. It's pure yellow. It does have a glow. It has a glow in it.
Well, good enough. Good deal. Electric cars. This month we've got, this is the, what is today? 2nd of November, 3rd of November, 2nd of November. A couple of things about that. We have the sales figures for Nissan and Chevrolet. What do you know about that?
Well, the Volt had its record sales, which was 2,961 units in October.
That's the most they've ever sold.
Most they've ever sold. And
not trending upwards real heroically. They went up, from August to September, they went up 20 units. September to October, up 110. But that's the right direction
to be going. So.
And 3,000 a month is what, 36,000 cars a year? I think they're verging on 3,000. And again, one of the things I'm delighted about this car, which I don't even think is an electric car, but the owners do. And they are discovering what can be done with 35-mile range.
Exactly.
And I would say by the time they drive one of those 2 or 3 years, and the reason the numbers are going up is the lease programs. Everybody's doing the lease. I had some viewers note that this was just part of the Nissan Leaf program, lease program for the summer. And I said, no, I'm not at $69. Now Ford has matched it with a $199 lease program on the Focus.
Amen.
And so I think this lease program, which takes out some of the risk and gets it down in a price range that's very different than the $40,000 $40,000 value proposition for a $20,000 car. It's all kind of revolving down to about $25,000. And the average price of a new car in the United States is somewhere $28,000, $29,000. And so we're getting electric cars down in a range where people could buy them if they wanted them, or at least lease them. And I think
I would lease.
Yeah, that would be the way to go. But the Volt guys buy it because they know they can drive it as a hybrid. And then they don't want to drive it as a hybrid. They like the electric part. Ford, their C-Max hybrids. Strongest October car sales in 11 years. In its first full month of sales, Ford's new C-Max hybrid outsold the Toyota Prius 5, 3,182 units to 2,769.
Which brings me to my next story.
And what's that?
I called Ford.
Did you call Ford? What did you call Ford?
I called them to find out what was going on and why they were having this success.
And what did they say?
They contacted me with a very important person there. His name was Gil Portalatin, and he is a Ford electric vehicle manager. Been there a very long time. And he was nice enough and gracious enough to grant me an interview and chat with me some this morning.
And what did he have to say?
Well, he said, I said I would like a quote, and I would like your basic feeling about the electric vehicle business and where it's going, given how successful you've been in the hybrid sales this month. And he said that he felt it was keyed in on the infrastructure, and that when it is very easy, especially for people in apartment buildings and in shopping complexes, to find locations where they can plug in and park their vehicle, it's going to grow the business. So
I don't think that's a big deal here, but I have
I
have been kind of interested in Ford's take on it. They tend to be a little more conservative. They through that whole 2008 thing, Ford never applied for any government money. They survive just fine. They're a victim of the government. And saving Chrysler and General Motors, that's taking money away from Ford and giving it to those people. And so they've been a victim of our new communist regime.
Well, anyhow, he did make the statement that, you know, if their drivers can go shopping and plug in at the same time, that would be very fine with him and Ford, and they would have a market, which I was thinking, my epiphany was that the parking angle, which has been brought up in prior articles, where if your local governments certify select premium parking spots for electric vehicles with charging associated to it, there would actually be an incentive to purchase an electric vehicle because you would get a very good parking spot. So I thought that was sort of an astute comment by
I think so. I'm not so much into the infrastructure thing as being an issue. I like the concept of the Volt owners' self-discovery that they don't need it. However, I did get an email from one of our German viewers, and he pointed out that in the urban areas, nobody has a garage. They all live in flats and so forth. And so it's a real problem. Electric cars just won't work for them. In the area of infrastructure, what did I write down here? Somewhere I've got it. There's been an outbreak in the CHAdeMO's General Assembly 2012.
I heard a little about that.
Held yesterday in Tokyo. Basically, General Motors is behind the SAE, and Nissan is behind CHAdeMO. And they noted some interesting facts. CHAdeMO President Toshiyuki Shiga, who actually happens to be the chief operating officer of Nissan, said in the U.S. and in Europe, there's at the event, the SE combo option was repeatedly called the plug without cars. So it's broken into a cat fight, but they did announce some interesting things. There's 33 companies, including charging station suppliers, supporting CHAdeMO. And as of this month, there's 1,071 CHAdeMO fast chargers installed worldwide. One of our viewers upbraided me that I had characterized the CHAdeMO installations in the U.S. as being minimal, and he pointed me to PlugShare, which lists 158 in the U.S. That is sparse. That is a handful.
I need to interject. I was somewhat confused. I thought the CHAdeMO layout was the receiving end that just went on a car and let you have a J1772 exactly next to a regular outlet plug. And
no, you have a J1772 plug, and then you have a CHAdeMO fast charge plug.
Okay.
And it has big pins for DC fast charging.
I was confused.
I kind of like CHAdeMO myself, and that is I don't have a problem having two ports on the car. I don't want to get them confused. And CHAdeMO uses CAN bus. The computer networking standard for automobiles is CAN bus. Now, CAN bus does not stand for car area network. It's just a computer area network somebody came up with. But over time, it's been adopted. It's in every automobile. And so now, why does SAE, in order to make us compatible with the grid, who has never really adopted the grid standard PLC, I don't understand why they went to that instead of staying with CAN bus. You have a bunch of all the cars that can do fast charging use CHAdeMO, and now SAE is going to have a standard here in the U.S. that's not compatible with it, and they don't have any cars and won't have until the Chevy Spark in 2013 that can use an SAE combo plug. And so the battle isn't over. They're fighting back, and it's turning into a cat fight.
I think it will.
With Elon Musk, of course, on the side, with a third version, and he's installing fast charge stations as well.
Which, those of you home, the systems are, not only are they fast charging, but there are computer readback to control all the mechanisms and let the charger know what's going on in the car. Is that correct? Basically.
The what now?
The PIN system is communicating from the charger back, the charger on the wall, to what's going on in the car. They are communicating back and forth.
It is computerly communicating.
Computerly.
Yes, computerly
That was the
communicating.
new word of the week, computerly.
I didn't know
I've invented a
computerly
new
was a word,
well,
but I like that.
You will see it next year on the internet.
Essentially, the charger in the car directs the
That's what I was trying to
electric
say.
vehicle support equipment, EVSE,
Exactly.
on the wall as to what to do,
as to what
what
to
it
do. That's what I
needs.
was trying to say.
Because the stuff on the wall doesn't know what kind of
That's
pack you
exactly
have.
what I was trying to explain.
You did a good
In a
job.
roundabout way.
And so one uses CAN bus, and one uses a new standard PLC, which causes some problems.
Which brings us to the next story.
And what is the next story?
Wired or unwired,
Well,
which is owners of electric drive models will be eligible for plugless power, wireless electric vehicle chargers. Now maker Evitran, which they're an aftermarket charger, and they have a distribution agreement with a company called SPX, and this will be a home charging station that does not require wires, and it's going to cost between $3,500 and $4,000. You will have an onboard receiver, which is a plate underneath the vehicle, and a garage floor transmitter, and it is a wireless system.
and you know, I'm okay with that. It's kind of introduces an inefficiency that you get around plugging in a cord, which is not that hard. But I'm on board, except it's unobtainium. This is a company that issues a new press release every month for the last 18 months. I've contacted them numerous times. I can't even get a response.
I couldn't either. I called them also.
Yeah,
So.
it's simply there are some companies playing in this space that want attention and mostly want investors, and Richard, you just got to learn to tell this is another of a bunch of press releases. Better Place, Tata. There's several, Invia and now CALB they just issue press releases. There's no products in there. These are people that just want attention and hope to attract investors. And they muddy the waters as to there are cool things available that appear to be eclipsed by things that don't exist and never will.
Probably not. Nope.
And so it's very difficult to tell the players. Apparently, they're going to offer something for Nissan and Volt owners, but and they have a company now that would go out and install that. They have a handshake agreement to do something, but none of it's been done. And so I have a short fuse on those kind of things. The Model S.
It is, yes, back in the news.
I found it very interesting. On October 28th, Tesla announced the 1,000th body of the Tesla Model S.
1,000, I'll write that down. What day is that?
October 28th.
October 28th.
And guess what its serial number was?
1,000.
You would think so.
I would. That's all I would do.
Yeah, it was serial number 396.
That's interesting. Okay.
A spokesperson, they now have their own PR babe, Christina Ra.
And that's the name they told me when I called.
Yeah, that's
She wouldn't talk.
has nothing to do with it being the 1,000th body.
Apparently.
What is the serial number for?
Well, it marks the series in which the number of the unit is made.
Don't they go consecutively? Isn't that what
Yes.
serial means?
That's what a serial means, yes.
So if you're on serial number 396, how can that be the 1,000th one?
In press
They're
release-
missing 600 Tesla Model S's. It's employee theft, I tell you.
604.
It's employee theft.
Yep.
It must be. They've leaked some product there.
Maybe they're counting down instead of counting up.
Maybe
They started at
they
13.
started at number 20,000 and they're down to
They're
300.
counting backwards. It's a countdown.
It's in any event, a magazine, automobile magazine, did some fairly extensive testing of 28 of the latest cars. 2012 Porsche 911 Carrera S, 2013 BMW M5, 2013 Cadillac ATS, 2013 Ford Fusion, 28 cars, and they named the 2012 Tesla Model S as the car of the year.
Automobile of the year.
Automobile of the year, was that what it was?
Automobile of the
Okay,
year.
very good.
So
And they go into some detail. I mean, this was 3 days of testing. They took them to a track. They did a lot of stuff, and in their opinion, it's a very winning car. Let's see. Jay Leno did a test drive of it. That's
I saw
on
that.
YouTube, Jay's Garage. He thought very highly of it. It's a good car. They're not apparently able to make them very quickly, and they this sort of thing like the 396 and the 1000, basically they are adopting the General Motors and Chrysler and BMW's concept that you can tell if they're lying because you can see their lips moving.
Yeah.
And I just don't approve of that. Just lay it out there. How damaging can it be? Just tell the truth about it and get over it. The cafe rules. Last month you fell in love with NADA.
NADA, which I had a joke for NADA.
National Automobile Dealers Association is coming out now against the cafe standards. What did I say about the American public discovering how pricey they would be? Number one, this 54.5 mile per gallon by 2025, those rules don't apply to trucks. Remember I said this was kind of the case, and this is what led to the death of the Toyota Tacoma, or
The mini truck.
the mini truck, the Chevy S10, the Ranger. They're all gone because they took away the exclusion from, I think, the emissions. Now it's happening with the CAFE standards. So the trucks have to be a certain weight, so they quit making all the little trucks.
Exactly.
But it doesn't apply to the trucks. And they say that this is, NADA says this will create a jalopy effect, according to NADA Chairman Bill Underrenner, where people hold on to their cars for longer because they don't like what's being sold. They don't think that the manufacturers can make a desirable car that people will want to buy for 54.5 mile per gallon. It'll be too expensive and too little and not what they want. And so there's going to be a huge market for 1988 Oldsmobiles.
Well, I don't believe it, though.
You don't think so?
No. I believe they are going to make it. I think they're going to make 54.
I don't think we'll see it.
2025. If you and I are still here, we're going to look this tape back up.
We've been through this before.
That's only 13 years.
Yeah, but as you get to the date, this is what happens.
They change
They
the law.
don't meet it, and it gets into a belly button contest, and they back down and change the law.
Change the law, I know.
And that was what happened to the
why we have
electric
elections.
vehicles before.
That's why we have elections. Sounds good, though.
So that's that. We continue work with our Speedster Nippon. And let's take a look and see what we've done.
Okay.
We're back on Speedster Nippon, and we have installed some batteries. What'd you run into here, Jess?
Well, I kind of had to build a level for the bottom of it and build a front so the batteries wouldn't fall back. And we just kind of tidied it up with a new plate on top here.
So you kind of built the box. This is the first time we've done this. Speedster had, they built an aluminum box at Special Editions. It was 1/4 of an inch too small. But with a hammer, we made that work. on Redux, when we redid it, Matt Harbour cut out the whole front end of the car and built another box to get 18 cells in. We only needed 14 this time, and Jesse figured out a way to get them all in there. But he kind of built a box in place out of, what do you have, 2 pieces?
Yeah.
And bent them on the brake to where there's a piece in the front here that you'll never be able to see, but it holds the batteries up. And we stuffed foam in front of that.
Yes.
To kind of brace it up where the batteries can't move forward. And then he did a piece here that covers this and goes down, and it has that nice, beautiful pattern from the, what do you call it, truck bed liner?
Yeah, bed liner, yes.
And you put that on a couple of times.
Yes.
How come?
Yeah, we didn't prime it the first time.
Is that right? Well, you were with me when we primed the back battery boxes, weren't you?
Yeah, I got a little ahead of myself there.
You decided maybe we didn't need that step?
Yeah. And
what happened?
It just fell right off the next day.
It fell off the next day.
Next morning came in, it wasn't, it was just rubber just laying on the top of it. So.
Well, we don't want that. That's why I had you primer it. Some of our viewers have suggested that we sand the aluminum first, and that's not a bad suggestion actually, but that I happen to know that acid number 8 etch from Yupon kind of pretty much gets into it at a microscopic level. It's a pretty good primer for aluminum, and so that should hold it pretty well, but you do have to have it. So we've learned a lesson there. Aluminum doesn't hold paint very good, does it? Bed liner, well, that's yeah.
Doesn't hold rubber, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's the trick there. I really like the way you've laid them out. We have our positive and negative terminals here. Where's the positive terminal go to?
Goes to our back left side battery box there.
Okay. The back left side battery box. So this is the most negative terminal in the pack, and then this goes to our battery box.
Correct.
And we'll go through that in the back. Where's the black one go?
It goes to our 500 amp shunt. Okay.
And you've mounted that underneath. We'll show that in a minute. And that's to hook in our JLD 404. I have a special surprise. On the 23rd, we received a couple of the new version of Recharge Car's amp block. And I have high hopes for this thing. We're going to talk about our instrumentation a little bit more next week, when I should get my second set of Speed Hut gauges in, the ones that are really the right size for this car. And we'll talk about instrumentation then, but the amp block is kind of like a device I used to talk about from, it was the Ziva from Australia, that would drive a gas gauge and your tachometer as an amp meter. And these guys have kind of reproduced that, but in a much nicer device that you program by USB from a PC, instead of trying to adjust these little pots for days trying to get it to work out. So I can't wait to see how that works. Ideally, that will give us, in addition to our JLD 404, a gas gauge on our dash that simply works to show state of charge. We'll have a button to zero that after we charge, and we'll have a, and then we'll also be able to use the tachometer not only for RPM, but also for the amperage, where you'll read, like the tachometer will read 1 through 6, and that'll be 1 through 600 amperes. And we'll have a switch where you can switch back and forth between those two. So we're going to kind of clutter up the dash, and I hope not mess it up too bad, but we'll have somewhat improved instrumentation over Speedster if all that works out, and a new device to talk about for the instrumentation to drive a gas gauge and a tachometer. Anyway, the batteries look good. There's 14 of them. I did want to just review how we attach those. These are SE 180 amp hour cells. We sell a 70 and a 76 millimeter strap. Where you put the batteries face to face, like here, you use a 70 millimeter strap. When you put them side by side or edge to edge, you have to use a 76. And we offer both of those. This is a 3M sanding block, fine. And it doesn't shed very much, is its main recommendation. And we use that to clean the corrosion off of those terminals right before we put the strap on. The strap will have a rounded edge on the top and a very sharp edge on the bottom. And I just take that block and knock a little bit of the tinning off so we got good bare tinning. And then of course we attach that with an M8 16 millimeter bolt and our Nordlock washers. And we have just gone to a new washer called the SP that gets us a little bit more area under the head. And this was after meeting with Richard VU of Nordlock USA. And because this is fairly soft material and the stainless steel bolt's quite hard, he was somewhat concerned about us getting enough tooth to dig into the stainless part. And so we have gone to a larger Nordlock for that. Now these were actually working fine, but it's okay to improve stuff incrementally where you get an opportunity. They're a little more expensive, about a nickel a piece more, but it simply has a wider diameter on the washer. That washer works much better to secure that bolt and strap to the terminal, and in the case of the SE 180s, that's to 20 Newton meters or 14.5 foot-pounds of torque, which of course you have a calibrated wrist, and so you don't have to actually use a calibrator. But for the rest of us, you might want a small torque wrench. To tell you the truth, they're hard to get in where you'll have batteries, so you kind of ought to torque a couple of down and then feel them and get the feel of what that feels like, and you come pretty close by hand. But you tighten them down snug, and this is a cam lock washer. It actually comes in two pieces, and the bottom piece digs into the tin copper, and the top piece digs into the bolt, and then there's a cam face between them that when you try to loosen it, it actually increases the pressure on the thread, and that's why it doesn't back off. And they are much better than about anything that we've found to put those batteries together. In any event, despite your misadventure with being young and knowing everything, like that we don't need primer, now you know. And this looks great. It's a great piece of work, and I think we've really dressed up the front. Our other car that we delivered to them had a piece of plastic over the whole thing, so it was hidden. I'm seriously thinking of taking a piece of lucite and putting it over the batteries themselves where you can still see them. But you could throw a jacket in there if you wanted to. And so we'll look at that more closely as we finish up front. Let's take a look at the battery boxes in the back.
All righty.
Here we are at the back of the car, Jess. What kind of problems did we have back here?
Well, I guess we didn't have too many.
Those boxes were pretty close to the right size, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
I put in all the cells on the left box. Did you do the ones on the right?
Sure did.
Do you have any problem getting that last cell in?
No, I didn't even have to beat it in.
Really? I kind of had to wiggle mine quite a bit.
I just kind of wiggled it a few times and it fell right in.
Ha!
Hey,
Well,
look at that.
it's better to be lucky than good.
And I did it twice.
I struggled with it. So our positive terminal from the front pack comes in at the back of here, goes through our battery cells, and then out. We're using 1/0 cable on this car. I think that will be more than adequate. This controller can do 550 amps, motor amps. I think that our runs are short enough that I believe that 1/0 cable will do it. We're going to go from this box then to an assembly we put together, a Blue Sea maintenance switch where we can reach in here and turn our pack on and off, and a fuse. And how did we hook those together?
We bent a piece of copper bar and cut it down and hooked them up.
Kind of heavy copper stock,
Yeah.
about 1.5 inches wide by 1/4 inch, and wired them together with a piece of copper bar and bolted it to this shelf that's underneath here. I'm going to try to show you this with a close-up. And then we have a wire that goes to our negative terminal of the right pack, and out the front of the pack to a bus bar.
That's right.
That's underneath our shelf. And then we hook up our DC to DC converter to that, and then we have our negative cable comes to a post underneath this side, right?
Yes, sir.
And then that comes up through a gland nut to our controller, and so we can hook our charger. Well, our charger will hook to the front at the shunt, and at the back here at your red bus bar that's underneath, that these nuts here hold in place, but it's hanging underneath the shelf. And then we'll bring that up to the controller, but we're going to have to build a little box there for our contactor, our pre-charge relay, and we have some other items. We've got a fuse for our kind of a 35 amp high voltage fuse to go to our DC to DC converter, and a small fuse block to give us 12 volts back here off the DC to DC converter for pumps and various things. And we'll probably have to put a relay on that to switch from the ignition to turn on our cooling system and our controller and so forth. And so that'll be that. We do have a couple of new items. This that he's mounted back here and it's not wired up yet is an opto isolator. There are two new functions on the Curtis 1238 controller that I really like. I've suggested another one, but that's not implemented yet. But these two are kind of cool. Pin 3 now will give you a brake relay output. And so whenever you go into regen, that will energize with 12 volts. We'll hook that up to a relay to switch 12 volt power to our brake lights, to where not only do we get brake lights when we press the brake, but also during regen. And I've had people actually pull up next to the stoplight and say, you know, your brake lights aren't working, because I slowed down, but they didn't get a light because I was using regenerative braking. The other function is out pin 2 of the 1238 J1 is now a tachometer signal. But they want you to isolate that, and they have an optical isolator that we're going to offer in the online store that is basically 12 volts from your regular DC to DC converter, your system, 12 volts and ground, and it provides a signal to your tachometer. The other side of the optical isolator is 12 volts and ground and the signal out pin 2. And so that output signal is isolated from our regular 12 volt system, because all of the 12 volt in the 1238 is actually generated internally. They have their own DC to DC converter in there, and they make their own 12 volt signals to run the brake transducer, and they make 12 volts and 5 volts. And so that's all one system. In case you're at a different ground reference, they want to isolate that tachometer output. We use a motor without an auxiliary shaft. The back end of the motor actually has a plate that covers it. And that's because our frame comes fairly close to the motor. You know, we might be able to get an aux shaft in there, I don't know. But we haven't been driving anything. And so the way we used to get a tach signal was to put an inductive pickup in the starter motor position and a couple of magnets on the flywheel. I like this better. We'll have an electronic RPM output from the 1238 to drive our tachometer. And so our tachometer will be driven by 2 signals with a switch switching between them, either this tach output from the 1238 or the current indication from the recharge car amp block. And so that'll be pretty nice instrumentation there. And so we'll be all electronic on the RPM indication. What else is going on back here? Well, like I say, we're going to have to construct a box to contain the brake relay and the pre-charge relay and the contactor. We'll probably put that optical isolator in there and just keep it tidy back here. But we have all the cells in and all strapped up, and all together they read about 96 volts, whatever it was, 2.75 volts times 36 cells, almost exactly. We got all this installed. So we installed it, turned on the switch, and we're ready to start our charger. Let's take a look. Yes. I kind of illegally make up a special cable that has a NEMA 16-50 plug on the end of it, which is the 50 amp service you see in most RV parks. And what do they use that around a house for, Jess?
Well,
dryers or something?
Range, I think.
A range?
Yeah.
And then I have a regular female NEMA 5-15 on the other end. I kind of tell them apart by putting this red shrink wrap on it and marking it warning 220. At Avcon, a couple guys didn't really figure out exactly what that meant. How many bulbs did they go through on that trouble light before they figured it out?
We went through 3 or 4 of them.
3 or 4, yeah, I thought so.
Before I looked down and noticed we were hooked into the 240 wire instead of the...
I can charge these little cars with this. Of course, we have a J1772 plug up front too. But I wanted to test it both 120 and 240, so I plugged in a regular cord, and then I plugged in this one. We're showing 16.1 amps at the moment. This is the JLD 404 that he's got set in this hair cell ABS plastic. And this will sit behind our center gauge position. And you've still promised me you got a way to clamp that where it won't get loose, right?
Coming up with stuff.
You'll come up with stuff. We're showing 16.1 amps. We're at 119.4 volts at the moment. We'll charge to about 126, and then it should cut off. And when it does, it'll drop down to about, if you've got it full up, it'll usually be 120.5 volts. That's with 36 cells at about 3.5 volts per cell is what we charge to. And I love this little meter. This one's blue. So we put 36.8 amp hours into 36 pretty much empty 180 amp hour cells. If we charge from empty to full at 16.1 amps, how long would it take to charge a 180 amp hour pack, Jess? He's not good at math.
Yeah,
Well, if we charge for 10 hours, how many amp hours would we put in?
160.
100, maybe 161, did you say?
Yeah.
If we added another hour, what would we have?
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. I can't think right now at all.
Well, we take the 161 and we add 16.1 to it. Are we getting closer?
Yeah, we're getting pretty close.
100 and what, 76.2? Is that what you said? I love these kids and their math skills.
100.
Actually, I'm not good at math either. I took 3 semesters of calculus and 1 on differential equations. I went through the whole series twice. I went through it once to get through it, and then I went back years later just to do it again so I could really do it, and I still can't. That's math. This is second grade arithmetic, but 176.2 would be 11 hours, and you might be able to stuff that much in there, but most of the time this will charge in 6 to 8 hours, but a full charge would be 10 hours with this charger. But it's very quiet and it's quite small. I kind of like it. I think it'll work out pretty good. I like the JLD 404. If we can get that amp blocker to work, I think this is going to be a pretty cool car. We'll have a gas gauge, an amp hour meter, and be able to check current on our tachometer or RPM. I think it'll be a very clean looking instrumentation pack that we don't have to do a lot of training on. The JLD 404, I'll have to do a little booklet on that, but the gas gauge should be pretty familiar even in Tokyo. And so I think we're going to be kind of move the mark a little bit on this one as an improvement on instrumentation. We have a gauge that comes with the 7601. We have the connector for it under the dash, and we're going to use it and even give it to them, but we're not going to mount it. It'll be like a troubleshooting type device. It's kind of cheesy looking anyway, and for your normal driver, it's not going to tell you a whole lot. We are going to try to set up a temperature gauge to show the temperature of the controller in kind of easy to read fashion. But I'm not sure why, other than just that we can. I think we can. And so that's what's going on with Speedster. What is today?
Friday, but I think it's the 27th, is it? Yeah.
Is it the 27th of October? How are you on calendar math? We're supposed to deliver by the 1st of November. We have the 28th and 29th as a weekend. We're going to have a real good week early next week. In truth, I think we'll have it rolling by then, but we need to test the car a little bit. So I think we're going to run a week or two behind Sam and Samurai. We're doing the best we can. I think the car will be pretty much ready, but I would not want to send it to Tokyo where you can't do much about it until I've tested it some, made sure we're getting that 100-mile range, and drove it around a little bit to see if it's actually all going to hold together. But so far, I think this is the best build we've ever done. And I haven't done very much of it. Jess here, as it turns out, is pretty good with his hands, and I'm pretty comical with mine, so kind of working together, I think this is going to wind up being one of the best builds we've ever done. It'll certainly be pretty slick and simple. So stay with us. Actually, quite a bit of that work was from last week. This week, I didn't get done enough to put it on the show. But I'm going to put up a photo of this device here. It's these guys at Recharge Car in Nashville intrigue me. They have some great ideas that it's been years that they've been talking about them and not really implemented them. I got 2 of their sort of beta version of their amp block this week.
Yeah, now I remember. Yeah,
That's what I've been back in the back room.
There you go.
Cussing and scratching
I know,
about.
we were looking for that. I remember that now.
This is a neat little device. It starts with a Hall effect current measurement device, and I pretty much had a thing called EVTV done, which was a Macintosh program and a little roving networks 16-bit A to D converter Bluetooth transmitter hooked up to a Hall effect. They're not terribly accurate. But assuming you can live with plus or minus 5%, and I can, these guys have got a lot of things right. They have an output that will drive a normal fuel gauge.
Okay, I like that. Okay.
They have another output that will run the tachometer. This is sort of after the fashion of the Ziva I was getting from Australia that you could never really calibrate.
And this is
I got a couple of those working, and they work quite reliably once they're going. But they were impossible to install. It took days of draining the pack and recharging the pack.
This is, since it's based on electrical flow, it is giving these readouts. If the viewers at home,
it measures the current through a conductor by the magnetic field created by the current.
And then it gives you a related, calibrated gauge number that you can read.
Well, it has a little processor in it, and it puts out a pulse for a tachometer.
Yes.
Where in let's say your tachometer is 1,000 to 6,000. Well, each increment of 1,000, they're scaling to 100 amps.
There you have it. Okay.
And so it'll show in your tachometer your current when you step on the accelerator. And because it's not a dancing number, it's actually an analog display, you can kind of see the current going up and down, which is very interesting, by the way, when you're driving, for me. The other output is an output to a fuel gauge, where it simulates the resistor in a fuel sensor. And so you can simulate that and drive an existing fuel gauge. I mean, conceivably, I could do this on the Cadillac Escalade and get the dash gauge to tell me, read state of charge.
Where you're at,
About.
I'm excited about that.
It also has a output, 5-volt output to light an LED at a warning level. But here's the good news.
Okay.
Instead of blindly twisting little pots and hoping for good things, this has some software, and you can talk to it USB, and it has an open standard or open packet thing that you can get the data on and write your own software to talk to it and make all kinds of displays. However, their initial software is just to set up the gauge and tell it how many amp hours your battery pack is. But you can also tune it to different gas gauges and set different states of charge and watch the needle move and check the linearity and
like
everything.
Like a real auto driver
on the bench. Yeah.
I'm all for that.
And you can put in different currents and see what the tachometer does on the bench.
Which there's a lesson in there for all car builders.
It also has an input that just takes a ground to zero it out because of the creeping inaccuracies. If you charge your car and press a button,
it zeroes out.
It zeroes it out, and you're back to, you've got a fully charged pack, you're at 0, and away you go at full, and you just press a button to set that. We're going to implement this in Nippon if I can get it all to work out. That's the good news on the software and how you can set this thing up pretty easily. The bad news is I have Windows 7 in in our Windows machine. It has a conflict with their driver, and it's absolutely unusable. And then I run it on the Macintosh. It's much snappier. But they have some serious problems left with their software.
It's got to work.
Well, it more or less does, but it's hugely ugly. It has some glaring errors in it, and they continue to work on it. Again, I'm kind of on the beta team, so.
Well, it is certainly something that we have always discussed. And for those of you at home, It is mechanisms that can read electricity, and you can basically begin to calculate things that are occurring with the electric vehicle, even getting to the point where you can calculate your range. And
An accurate
all sorts of
gas
things.
gauge has been something we've sought at EVTV since we've been doing it.
I know. I've
And I
been
don't
on board
know how
with this.
accurate this will be, but it'll be pretty good. I like the Ziva from Australia. And I had it, the Speedster that we shipped to Tokyo. It works pretty good. With the old Porsche gas gauge.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And I've got one on Speedster Redux, and it works reasonably good. But there's some problems with that, that Ziva, and I finally gave up on it. I just don't want to deal with it. Amp blocker is going to be, you know, the
More to come.
Yeah, more to come.
And I want to see it, and I'm sure we'll have some tech film on it. So
My thing to capture the screen on the Mac, I'm having computer issues. Everybody's upgrading their operating systems, and so the Snap Z that I use to make a little movie with the Mac screen doesn't do it right with the new Mountain Lion Mac OS X, and so I have to get that upgraded, and so forth to really be able to show you how this works. But
well, we're all waiting. Now you have intrigued the audience. So
yes.
we're going to be waiting on you. For
Well,
your
we
software.
probably have to do that next week because I
I'm
got
ready.
these gauges in the car, and I've got them kind of working. It's kludgy to set it up, but once you set it up, it's set up. You put it in the car, and it just works. And so that should be pretty straightforward. So more on amp block later. I had threatened to talk about lithium batteries. And in fact, in our charge function, our fast charge function, which I meant to update this week, I made kind of an error on temperature on the fast charge
Yes,
thing.
we should be honest and
I-
report that journalistically.
All right, I'll report it briefly, and it doesn't really change any of what we were testing. But remember, I noted this huge increase in temperature at the end in the last 2.5 amp hours. Well, my thermal thing was aimed down at the metal clip, and with the
Lower grade metal and just
no, with the Power Lab 8 workstation, I'm charging through the clip and through the bolt. Remember, I said we don't have any current flow through the bolt, where it goes through the terminal, and so the temperature goes through the bolt, and that's true, except then when I'm charging with the recharge card, I am actually putting current through the bolt and the clip, which is where my temperature probe's aimed.
got it.
And those are not very good conductors, so they build heat.
They build a little heat.
And so we'll
lower grade
repeat
metal.
that test just on the last 2.5 amp hours and move the clips to the, back up the cables where they're not, where we're measuring the temperature, and I think it will be cooler.
Well,
It doesn't change the temperature that we measured during the fast charge, which was 10 degrees. It just, the change from 70 to 126 was 56 degrees.
Yeah, may change all
That's out off the table.
honest mistake, though. I think it was honest. Is what happened.
I make a lot of them. That's the problem.
But I will tell you this: now that you brought up the CALB Pro 8, it has been selling very well, and we've had very good.
it's a neat device.
It is moving, so I think everybody probably would be well served to have a device that can you can hand work with each battery. basically.
I have mixed emotions about it. It's a neat little device. I like it that I can export the data to an Excel file.
And I like those graphs. yes.
It's fairly accurate in measuring current and voltage. It's actually quite accurate. I'm afraid of what people are going to do with this thing. It's designed for radio-controlled helicopters, guys. And they've kind of built it up to 40 amps, but the little connectors and stuff are not up to 40 amps.
30 amps maybe.
30, 20 better.
Okay.
I'm doing some 30, but they're getting warm.
Okay.
And of course, when you put this on a 180 amp hour cell and let it drain for 14 hours at 30 amps, that heat builds up and you're doing it unattended, because this thing will manage it for you. But be careful with this thing. It's designed for radio-controlled helicopters. It is actually a neat device.
It's neat.
You can learn a lot about your batteries without spending so much money as I do on test equipment to do 500 amp loads and 200 amp charges, and that sort of thing takes, I've probably got $15,000 worth of just meters and stuff in there. This is a $300 device that can do a lot of that.
And it works with individual cells.
And you can get smart with stuff, and you can do battery testing with it. But don't try to, you know, do a 200 volt, 200 amp hour pack with one of these little recharge car things. It just doesn't make any sense. They're not designed for that. But it's a neat device. So did we do the, have we gone to my lithium weather
we
talk?
have not. And I'm
We're going to attempt to be a weatherman with a diagram on our
lithium
chroma key wall, and I'm going to try to cover, as I did a little bit, talk about some anode issues, and give a little bit of an introduction to lithium battery operation and what some of the current thinking on as to how it works. You understand they invented it, and they've even discovered ways to improve it, and nobody really knows how it works. That's the dirty little secret.
Yes, that's a lot of electricity and electrical devices.
The theory is somewhat lagging the manufacture.
I like the drawing, though, and having seen an open case of the lithium battery, which you see the very thin packs.
You can relate to this.
You can relate much easier, so you at home, you may want to primer yourself.
You understand the diagram's wider.
The diagram is much wider. And it's a lot of this going on. It's a multiple pack of the same process over and over.
400 of these.
400 of these.
So let's take a look at me trying to play Weather Channel.
Professor Rickard.
Weather Channel with a lithium diagram on the wall. Have me strutting back and forth in front of it, chanting nonsense.
I know.
This is, it's got to be good.
Yeah.
Let's take a look. In a technological video tour de force, today, I am going to attempt to simulate the hippy-dippy weatherman. You know, I had a burgeoning career, could have been huge on the Weather Channel. Problem was, at a tender age, I had a rotator cuff injury. I could do Texas okay, but when it came up here to the Dakotas, I was pretty much out of the game, so they let me go. But I am going to try to use this green chroma key wall in addition to making my feet disappear. We are going to put up a diagram that I have stolen and then remade of a lithium-ion battery diagram. I have been threatening to do this. We introduced the anode last week in a discussion of what's happening when we're fast charging. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics in attempting to explain things that I understand poorly and that the absolute experts in the field change how they understand it weekly. And I do mean weekly. I probably do 6 hours of reading of scientific papers a week on lithium battery cells, most of which refute the things that I read in the previous week. And so the lithium battery, our reach kind of exceeds our grasp on what really happens in there. Historically, a fascinating guy named Dr. James Goodenough, working with Sony in 1990, developed a lithium cell using lithium cobalt, and the first graphite or carbon anode. In 1996, an assistant of his, whose name doesn't precisely escape me, I just can't pronounce it, Ashad Paksaye, at the University of Texas, Austin. Forgive me, it's something like that. Proposed the use of what he called polyanions as a battery, and ultimately lithium iron phosphate, which turns out to be a very, I think, very good battery chemistry, and the one that we favor today and that I'll talk about today. This is done somewhat experimentally. They have theories, and they mix mixtures of materials, and then they test them. And if they test well, they can be further developed and refined into an ever better battery. What actually happens in the battery is not exactly as known as you think. They have theories, and they continue to refine those. Anode reality, I last week described some very pretty AA-BB pairs of graphene sheets and a very orderly arrangement of lithium ions diffusing in between those sheets in a certain order and in a certain way. The reality of anodes in battery manufacture is they're mostly coconut shell. And they take coconut shell and they burn it, and then they put it through a very slow centrifuge, a rolling furnace, and I suppose calcify it or calcate it. They remove all the moisture from it. And so it becomes very fine powder, and it's carbon in a fairly pure form. But the concept of carbon C6 covers a multitude of sins. Among them is graphene and graphite, but also any number of other carbon structures alloyed with any number of impurities. And so those neat crystalline structures are more of a jumble, and in very small particles that can be any number of things. And so that's the reality of the very pretty carbon crystalline structure that I described last week. The cathode is somewhat more complex. And let me play weatherman here. Normally they have a little monitor off to the side where they can look at that and see what they're doing. I'm guessing, and so you have to kind of give me a little slack here. Our cathode has a aluminum metal connector over here, and then a very thin layer of material. And that material consists of a binder, some glue, essentially, that attaches the material to the aluminum current collector, and in our case, lithium iron phosphate. Iron phosphate or ferric phosphate is actually fertilizer. It's very inexpensive and very common. It consists of iron in a structure sharing covalently, that term from last week, sharing electrons with 6 oxygen atoms, and that puts it in a much more complex crystal lattice than the carbon hexagon. It's actually a orthorhombic tetrahedron, which is generically referred to as an olivine structure. Pictures multifaceted pyramids. And the 6 oxygen atoms that are covalent with the iron atom are also covalent with a phosphorus atom. And so we get very complicated, some other little tetrahedrons that are on the corners of the iron oxide tetrahedron. And so we have a very lumpy angular crystal lattice. And the lithium would have to normally zigzag through that to find spots analogous to that very pretty hourglass looking situation in the anode. There's a problem. Lithium iron phosphate's an insulator. It's a very poor conductor. And so we can't get electrons to really flow from our aluminum current collector out into this material. And so we can't establish charges and take away charges to attract or repel lithium ions. And that refers to the conductivity and the diffusion in the cathode. And so to increase the conductivity, what we do in the cathode is to mix that with carbon, which again is a good conductor along certain planes. And so in the anode, our battery is really based on a lithiated carbon anode, and that is a lithium intercalated anode is what makes the battery. We can't mix lithium with carbon and paste it on the copper and do any good with it. It just doesn't work. And so we can combine lithium readily with ferric phosphate or iron phosphate. And so they combine lithium, the metal, with iron phosphate and a binder and some carbon, and they tumble all that very good and glue it to our aluminum current collector, and we have a cathode. Now, we still have this diffusion problem. If we make that mixture very thin, we can have good conduction and good intercalation into it, and so we can make a lot of power quickly. But because we don't have very much material, we can't store very much energy. If we make it thicker, we can store more energy. We can intercalate more lithium into that cathode material. But now we have diffusion and conduction problems getting through it and essentially communicating charges to the aluminum current collector. So that's one of the trade-offs. You've all heard us talk about A123 batteries or remarkable performance. What they did was shrink the lithium iron phosphate to some very tiny nano size. As you know, Richard likes nanos. So these are very small pellets of lithium cathode material, lithium iron oxide, phosphate, and they coat those little pellets with carbon. And so that puts the thing, you have to go through the carbon to get to that, which is no problem because the carbon is, of course, permeable to lithium ions, but it's also a good conductor. And then we mix that with a binder and put it on the thing. There's also a lot of magic sauce out there. Every battery manufacturer has various dopants that they think will increase conductivity of lithium iron phosphate. Yttrium is one, vanadium, molybdenum, cerium. And so everybody has their magic sauce that they will not tell you what it is they put in there, but it's some rare earth element, metal usually, that they put in the lithium iron phosphate to make it more conductive. As I said, we can mix lithium with iron phosphate fairly readily, and we can mechanically mix this and put it with the binder and glue it onto the aluminum anode. Of course, the battery works on lithium ion. And so that takes us to our first charge, and it's called the formative charge. It can be a series of them. They're done quite slowly, and I'll explain why in a moment. And what we do, if you can see in the circuit here, we go from the aluminum, we take electrons, and with a power supply, pump them all the way over here, and put them on our copper current collector. And they go out into our carbon and establish essentially a negative charge. And as you know about static charges, capacitors, we have then set up a difference in potential between the copper collector and the aluminum collector, essentially making the aluminum more positive and the copper more negative, and that sets up a static field across that cell. We've talked about iron and phosphate and oxygen and lithium, and of those, lithium has the poorest power to retain its electron. It has 2 electrons and 3 protons in the nucleus, and 2 electrons in a low orbit, and 1 in a second energy band or valence band. And that electron is very easily detached, and that's why lithium is so reactive. It will react with anything. It's probably the 3rd element of the universe after hydrogen and helium, and we almost never find it in a pure state, like hydrogen, which also readily combines with things. It gives up that electron so easily. It's so light and so tiny, like hydrogen, that a piece of lithium metal will float on water. It has essentially the density of pine wood, dry pine wood. But if you did float it on water, it would react with the water and actually cause a fire. It might explode. It just very quickly gives up that electron to the hydrogen and oxygen in the water, forming new compounds. And so when we set up this charge, we're basically causing the electrons in the lithium metal, and it is as lithium metal initially, comes off of the lithium atom and out into the current collector, and we have a lithium ion. And lithium ions have a positive charge because they have 2 electrons and 3 protons at that point. And they want to distance themselves from each other, as we said last week in the anode. So there's some pressure at that point to diffuse out of the lithium iron phosphate and into our electrolyte, simply because the lithium ions want to put distance between themselves. They'll expand whatever room they have in doing that, and a kind of uniform pressure distribution. But there's another force acting on them, and that is that this is the positive side, and this is the negative side, and we have an electrostatic field between those two. And that tends to accelerate the lithium ions in this direction. And we want to go from the lithium iron phosphate, and we want to go over here to the anode side and intercalate with the, through charge transference, as I described last week, with the electrons that are flowing in the free flow of electrons along the graphene plane, which takes on a negative charge, which attracts that positive charge and holds that in that cage. There's no covalent bonding here. This is strictly a matter of, by charge, it's attracted to be in this position between 2 layers and inside of that hexagon by charge transference. Here's the problem. We have to have an electrolyte to get there from here. In the middle of the battery, we have a separator made out of polyethylene or polypropylene with holes in it. And it's actually, where we say we have electrolyte on both sides of it, it's actually a little bit absorbent and absorbs the electrolyte. And so we have a wet napkin made out of plastic trash bag that has absorbed a mixture. The essential function of it is a lithium salt called a lithium hexafluorophosphate, LiPF6, in a non-aqueous solution, and that is there is no water in it. We can't allow any water to get in it. It has to be free of H2O. And we use essentially a variety of ether carbonates. DMC is a dimethyl carbonate, EC is ethylene carbonate, DEC is diethylene carbonate. There's a PVC, which is actually not turned out very good, a poly vinyl carbonate, and a couple of others. But that's usually some aspect of these what are called inorganic solvents, but it's alcohol, methanol and alcohol primarily, but with no water. And so that's the function. In the formative charge of the battery only, not only, but primarily in the formative charge of the battery, our lithium ion is trekking across here, and it reacts with these solvents primarily in some bad ways. And that causes the solvents to precipitate some solid matter, some precipitates that come out of the solution and become solids. And they form a thin skin, a kind of a vinyl covering or a rubber coating on our carbon anode. And we call this the solid electrolyte interphase layer. And it's a problem and a solution both at the same time. And we do this fairly slowly, so a few lithium ions are going across, reacting with the solvents and forming this SEI layer. The SEI layer then does a couple of good things. We build up lithium ions in the anode in fairly large numbers. Lithium ions, as we've established, react with the solvents in the electrolyte. If we had a bunch of them in the carbon suddenly exposed to our electrolyte, they would have a very thermal reaction. And so this SEI layer kind of seals off our lithium ions in the carbon anode and keeps the rest of the solvents from reaching them and causing a reaction. And so it's like a sealant. The process of intercalation of lithium ions into the carbon causes the lattice to expand mechanically, and it fractures in some cases. Intercalation, it expands; deintercalation, it shrinks back, and this wears out our carbon, and it breaks into pieces. The SEI layer kind of functions to hold that wall of crumbling bricks together in place and extends the life of the battery. However, there is a diffusion delay between getting the lithium ions through the SEI layer, which they can penetrate. Lithium ions are very small, much smaller than any of the atoms and molecules in the electrolyte. And so they can diffuse through it, but it delays it, and it actually causes a little bit of a voltage drop. That voltage drop, as we increase our current, for example, in fast charging, if it reaches a certain point, it will cause a rupture of that SEI layer and a fairly catastrophic runaway situation then. And so each time we move lithium ions through here, it thickens this SEI layer. The initial ones is the big laydown of the solids. After that, it slows down quite a bit. But that's part of the aging of the battery and the increase in impedance or as so many of you insist on discussing it as internal resistance, but it is a diffusion delay and a little bit of a drop there in the battery that thickens and increases with age, and which causes the battery to age more. So in the formative stage, we're taking lithium metal, ionizing it, converting it into a cation by removing the electron and bringing it around and pumping it out onto the anode side. And because of the electrostatic field and the diffusion of the repulsion of the positive cations to each other, we migrate across the battery and intercalate into the anode. And that really establishes our battery. From there on, we won't see lithium metal in any good sense ever again. When we discharge, those electrons flow around the circuit, show up over here, and the lithium ions are gradually released. They penetrate the SEI barrier, they penetrate our separator, and they go over back to the lithium iron phosphate, but at this point, they're not going to be get their electron back. They're going to be attracted by the charge in the graphite and the conductors and so forth, and they're going to intercalate into the lithium iron phosphate, or into the iron phosphate matrix, much as they do in the carbon side. And so this formative charge is very important. This is the point where we create lithium ions, and it's the point where we create the solid electrolyte interphase layer. And once we have our anode fully lithiated, and we have removed all the lithium from the or most of the lithium from the phosphate cell, we're said to be fully charged. When we discharge the battery, we hook through a load, and there's just a huge difference in potential here. We have a lot of negative charge built up, not on the plate, the copper plate like a capacitor. Yes, they do build up there. And you do have kind of a capacitive effect, but that wouldn't provide us very much energy. Much more so, we have this fuzzy area, this thick charcoal wall with billions of lithium ions intercalated into that structure. And it gives the entire, the electrons hold the lithium ions in place. The lithium ions hold the electrons in place. And they have no place to go anyway because we pump them in here and then disconnect it. It's an open circuit. The electrons can't go anywhere. The battery is storing that charge. On this side, we have taken electrons out of the aluminum. And just like a capacitor, we have that effect. But we have also removed electrons from the lithium that was in the lithium iron phosphate. And with every electron removed, that becomes more positive. When we send it around to the other side, this becomes more negative, and we wind up with a difference in potential of about 3.38 volts. And that's the way it is, and that's where it's at. And the reason we can do a lot of current or run this for a long time is because there's lots of lithium ions embedded in our charcoal over here, our coconut shells, and there is a lot of lithium missing from our original mixture of fertilizer, ferric phosphate. And with an open circuit, that's the way it stands, 3.35 volts. And if we connect a load between the two of them, we can reverse the process. The negative will tend to flow toward the positive, and going through our load do work. When we decrease the charge here, we have essentially decreased its ability to hold all those lithium ions in position. And they begin to escape. They migrate through the SEI layer, and they migrate through the separator, which is got very small holes in it. It keeps the two plates from actually touching and shorting the cell. But the lithium ions, again, a very small molecule, 3 neutrons, 3 protons, and now 2 electrons, goes through and it encounters the iron phosphate, which now has electrons coming into it, increasing its negativity and allowing the lithium ion to intercalate there. And so all is right with the world. We got a battery now. We got a battery, but it's a working battery, and it's turning our motor, running our lights, our hair dryer, and our blower. And all is right with the world until we have depleted the number of lithium ions in the anode, and they have migrated to the cathode and intercalated there. Now, the next time we do this after the formative charge, or there may have been 2 or 3 of these to make this happen, then we can easily extract, more easily extract even, electrons from the cathode side and pump them around onto the negative side. And so our lithium ions go back and forth, carrying charges, actually in support of the external flow of electrons. And that's how we store energy and how we release energy. They call this a rocking chair situation because it goes back and forth. The lithium ions never get into any external circuit. They just shuttle back and forth in a rocking chair type fashion. And that brings us to some of the things that you've been concerned about in the destruction of the cell. One of them occurs when overcharging the cell, and the other one occurs when over discharging. We'll talk more about this in future episodes. Let me give you an overview at the moment. If we remove all the lithium ions here, all the lithium metal gives up its electrons, and we move all the lithium ions over to here, none of that is telling our power supply very much because we don't have a BMS, or our BMS more typically is stupid. And so we continue to apply these charges, and we continue to try to pull off electrons off of this. Now, there's currently 2 schools of thought. The original belief was that we took electrons from the iron and caused an Fe2 or an Fe3 cation, an iron ion, to form. And that's held for a long time. Some of the more recent evidence would tend to make us believe that iron from the cathode leaches into the electrolyte, and copper from the anode does too. And so we have certain impurities in the electrolyte itself, and that's where these iron ions come from. In either case, we are electrostatically removing an electron from this side and putting it over to that side. And what happens is that those iron ions go over here just like lithium ions, and they want to intercalate into the carbon matrix too. A couple of problems with that. Iron is hugely larger than lithium ions, and it can't get through the SEI layer at all. And so it starts to build up here. And as it builds up, it forms a dendrite. A dendrite is like a kind of like a stalactite or a stalagmite. It's a buildup of a pointed structure. And so it's building a sharp little knife that grows in length in this direction. It also shows up over here from certainly the iron in the thing. It builds up on the cathode side. And so we have 2 needles growing toward each other that are really only separated by a 3 mil plastic garbage bag. If they puncture it, they short the cell, and it discharges completely through there in a kind of a violent display of current. Now you understand that all these foils are in parallel, and so that will also start to discharge all the other cells. And we can get very quickly into a thermal runaway situation that not only shorts the cell and causes high currents, but blows up our SEI layer, allowing all our lithium ions that we've stored there to suddenly begin to react with the solvents in our electrolyte, not in an orderly fashion as in charging, and not in an orderly fashion such as discharging, but suddenly our SEI layer is breaking down and we've got an inrush of solvents into the intercalated lithium, and that goes into thermal runaway. And so normally a thermal runaway situation starts in the anode, not the cathode. And that's where the temperature starts to rise, and away we go. If nothing else, the iron plates on our SEI layer diminishing our capacity substantially. And worse, then later, if we discharge the cell and recharge the cell, now we have lithium that's blocked on the surface of the SEI layer by iron plating. And so the lithium plates onto the iron. And as that builds up, it reacts with the SEI layer, with the solvents. And so we have this massive scab growing on our cathode and diminishing our capacity. But if we do it enough where we short this cell, it will go into thermal runaway and you'll have quite a fire. And it feeds on itself. As it goes into runaway, it gets hotter, the SEI layer melts, and this thing takes off. At some point, it gets so hot that our cathode begins to dissociate oxygen out of this Fe1 atom, 6 oxygen atoms, and 4 phosphorus atoms. The phosphorus actually stabilizes this quite a bit. It's a much safer chemistry than lithium cobalt or lithium manganese oxides, which readily give up oxygen. You've got to heat this up to twice the temperature to get it to do it. Once that oxygen starts to come out, now we're feeding the whole thing. The oxygen starts to react with the electrolytes and with the rest of it, and the result can be an extremely hot fire, and we've seen the results of cars burning to the ground, primarily from overcharging. Let's talk about over-discharge and how that's all better, because it can burn your car down too. We actually recently had our first experience of an over-discharge causing a fire, and it was with an A123 battery that we over-discharged and then let sit for 6 days. And on the 6th day, it burst into flames, burnt 1.5 inches through a 2-inch maple tabletop, filled our shop with smoke, and was really quite a thermal event. And so be aware that it is now dead certain that over-discharge can also cause a thermal event. Over-discharging is a little bit different. As the charge diminishes on our cathode or our anode side, the copper begins to oxidize. And as it oxidizes, it gives up copper ions, which are fairly smaller, and they start to precipitate out of through the carbon anode, and again start plating on the SEI layer. And that diminishes our ability to, it diminishes the capacity of our cell. This starts to occur below 1 volt. The copper begins to oxidize and so essentially dissolve and give off copper ions into our battery cell. And that copper plating, every place that appears, reduces our ability, copper plating on that SEI layer. It builds up kind of on the inside of the SEI layer. Now the next time we go to charge the cell, our lithium can't get through there because of the copper. And so it builds up as lithium metal on the outside. And as it gets up to a certain amount of it, that starts to react with our solvents, and we have the same thermal runaway situation. And so you have to be very careful in charging again an over-discharged cell. Do it at a low current level and see what happens. What we've observed is that the voltage comes up and then it starts going back down. When it starts doing that, the temperature starts going up. Quit. You're done. That cell can't be recovered. There is no magic procedure. You've lost the cell. And so over-discharge primarily is a function of copper plating on the SEI, and overcharge is primarily a function of iron dendrite growth. A lot of people talk about copper shunts being involved out of here. Some, that copper plating can turn into dendrites and again puncture your separator. And if that happens, it shorts the cell. And so you have essentially the same effect on overcharge and over-discharge. Overcharge tends to be a buildup of iron, and over-discharge tends to be a buildup of copper. And most of this has to do with the central weakness of our lithium ionic cells, and that is the electrolyte. All electrolytes are a compromise and kind of a mess. And it's not done in a terribly scientific way. They simply try different mixtures and see what happens. And so the electrolyte, I think, is the weak part of lithium-ion batteries, and why we have many variations of that with solid-state batteries, polymer gel batteries, and so forth, is people just sort of, in an alchemist's quest to turn lead into gold, come up with some mixture that will work better in a lithium-ion cell. But it's because of all the problems that come from our electrolytes. And so that should give you a little bit of an overview about the intercalation and deintercalation of the anode, the intercalation and deintercalation of the cathode after the first formative charge, which we put our lithium metal in this mixture because we can, and then turn it into cations, which they remain for the rest of the life of the battery. And give you a little bit of an overview of what happens with overcharge and over-discharge and why those are the two no-nos with lithium batteries. The effects of temperature. Increased temperatures cause a lot of these things to happen more quickly. But the biggest problem is that our electrolytes, again, begin to gas, and most especially the ethylene carbonate at about 90 degrees centigrade. There's some other things that happen before that, and so we say the band of 70 to 90 degrees centigrade is a bad place to be with these batteries internally, certainly externally. And you can send a battery into thermal runaway with external temperatures, but it has to be up 70 degrees centigrade. So we look at anything external to the battery above 60 degrees centigrade, 158 degrees Fahrenheit, as being bad news. As long as you're below 158 degrees Fahrenheit on your anode or on your case or so forth, you're probably not doing grave harm to the batteries. That gets you into whether the 120 or 130 degrees in the Phoenix parking lot can shorten the life of the cell. Probably not measurably, probably not in any practical sense. It certainly has an effect, but the effect would most likely be so small that you would need fairly sophisticated equipment to be able to detect it across, oh, say, 5 years. But temperature does have an effect. We like to talk about all things with lithium batteries below 60 degrees centigrade, 158 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope that helped. Stay with us. Richard, have we missed anything?
I sat through the entire lecture, and I took notes, and I don't know that you missed anything that I was aware of.
Do you have any questions, class?
I always want to be clear. Covalence is when two of the outer bands occupy the same. The nucleuses are inside the outer bands. Is that correct?
Not precisely.
I thought that was covalence.
Covalence would be, let's say I was a solar system.
That's what okay.
And I had an electron called Pluto on my outer ring.
Okay.
And you were a solar system with a different star. And you had 7 or 8 planets. And we got so close together that Pluto got confused.
Inside and, okay.
Follow me now. And so Pluto going around me gets confused when it encounters the other one and goes around him too.
Got it. Okay.
And now he's circling the 2 of us.
Got it.
We are sharing a valence band electron.
I got it.
An outer valence band electron. And so, and that can be in a figure 8, it can be out in an ellipse. It's not a perfect circular shell like the some of the other ones are, although they vary too. We're sharing an electron covalently. A valence band between
that
2
was
of us.
close to what I I could remember from.
Now understand the lithium ions do not bond with these crystal lattices covalently. They're simply intercalated there by charge, by proximity.
They're setting inside the openings.
Right. They're setting inside the openings in the material mechanically, and they're positioned there by the difference in charge between the crystal structure being negative and they are positive.
Okay.
So the illustration I used last week was, and you've seen these on YouTube, the levitating ball that hangs between the 2 magnets.
There is actually a few things on YouTube you can also associate with this teaching, and I have tried. I have done.
So that's by charge transference. It becomes part of the material, but it is not in combination with it. There's no covalency.
Okay.
That's kind of an important point.
Yes, that was something I wanted to understand. And then the everything else covered it, because the movement of the free electrons was very clear and easy to understand.
Okay, good. Test questions.
Okay.
What happens when you overcharge a cell?
It creates a iron, something with a D, like a stalagmite, and the other side creates the same thing, and if those 2 touch, it goes boom.
It shorted the battery.
Bad, yeah.
Eventually, from either side, they will pierce.
They pierce the plastic.
The separator, and that's bad news. What happens in an over-discharge situation?
Over discharge, a similar effect occurs, except it's with the copper.
That's right.
And the copper builds up.
Copper oxidizes and starts plating on the
plates on the outside.
SEI.
And then if it breaks, basically they're in, I always describe it as, a plastic bag. So if it breaks the plastic bag, either through an overcharge or an undercharge, and it contacts the other,
it's bad news.
Bad news. You have cross current.
Now,
inside
short of bad news, you'll have capacity loss. At bad news, you're not worried about capacity loss. You're worried about the fire.
Fire or cell loss, yeah.
Right. And so that's don't overcharge, don't over-discharge. How do we keep from over-discharging? We bottom balance the cells. And here was a point that I brought out on a blog, and it's just not occurred to me to do on video. When you're charging, you're artificially holding the voltage up. And so you are up the steep side of the slope, but if you let it go, it falls back down. And so you're kind of perched there trying to do things while you have diffusion going on. That's top charging. Bottom charging offers another serious advantage. We can discharge the cell to where it's on the vertical slope of the discharge curve and stop.
Yep.
And we can let it sit for a day. And we can actually measure where it is in state of charge, because on the vertical slope, our state of charge will vary largely from small changes in voltage.
Okay.
Up on the flat part, it doesn't vary very much in voltage for even large changes in state of charge. So we have the 2 ends. What's the difference between 2 ends? This one we are climbing artificially. We're pumping current into the battery, and it's diffusing while we're doing that. We have a very interactive thing going on here, right? And when we let it go, it starts to plunge back down to open circuit voltage. On the discharge side, it's static. We can simply stop the discharge. And it'll wander around a little bit, and it'll settle fairly quickly to a voltage. And we can adjust, put in little bits of current, take out little bits of current, and change that voltage, which represents this point of state of charge. And so that's the primary advantage, of course, is when the battery runs out, that
It stops before it goes to the bottom.
It kind of, all the cells go down at the same time. And so you can't have one set of cells damaging another. At the top, we don't care. The bottom, we could be discharging at 1,000 amps. Charging, it's going to be 15 amps, 200 amps in a fast charge situation. And so, but the curious difference that I had never really articulated is that we're not really there on the top balance thing. There's a lot of other stuff going on.
Exactly.
Thermals and diffusion and
it's a current,
it's a dynamic situation, and we're using a fake recipe to get it to a place we can't see or measure. And then we have to let it go, and a day later see what it did. And so discharge is different. We can discharge to 2.5 volts, let it go, it'll climb back up to about 2.75, 2.80, and that's where I trim it. And then just a little bit of resistance, I can leak out a little current or add a little current in and change that voltage where they're all the same. And because they're on the vertical face, small changes in voltage indicate large changes in state of charge.
The movement,
And so that's the bottom balancing gig. And
which
so
I'm thoroughly on board with now.
Moderation. It works. And actually, Jack Rickard did not invent this, guys. DeWalt, the power tool company, has a patent on a bottom balancing charger for power tools. I mean, this is not a contrived, you know, I just came up with this out of the blue. We've had to kind of relearn it and how useful it is for electric cars.
They use a lot of lithium batteries.
They use a lot of lithium. And in fact, they use a lot of lithium iron phosphate lithium batteries.
Yes. So they would know.
And so, well, that's the appeal to authority no longer works with me. It's show me. I'm from Missouri.
We're from Missouri. It is the show me state.
I think that's a pretty good show, don't you?
That is a very good show. And I got...
Is there anything else we need? We're forgetting something important. What is it?
Well, I did talk with Gil quite a bit about why the C-Max Hybrid was selling so well.
What did he say?
He said it had a good price point. It's around $33,745.
I heard they were selling them at around 25.
Well, that's a very good price point.
And that was why they were competing with Toyota.
This was listed in a press release, probably a little dated, but you know, a plug-in hybrid, which is
we're gonna have to start keeping an eye on Ford, because I thought they would do something, but they've been kind of slow coming in. We'll see how that goes. So we're going to continue to monitor the true what we can divine as the true state of the automakers' efforts on electric cars, and we're going to continue to explore how you can get better and newer stuff to make your own electric cars. And I'm convinced that one way or another, as we plod into the future, this is all
getting
going to happen.
It's warming up. Play that fiddle.
Play that fiddle, baby. We'll see you next week.